Hey, folks, welcome to Thursday, July 31st. What? Yes. Tomorrow, I'm flying to Houston for a wedding. Who wants to go to Houston in August? I don't know. If it weren't for the wedding, but these are some very special people, very, very special friends of ours. Okay, today, in hour two today, I'm going to be speaking to Steve Hilton. He is running for governor of California. I am thrilled that he's running for governor of California. Can we save California? I think anything is possible. These things are tough, but we should dream. We should pray. Can we save Europe? It looks impossible, but frankly, Donald Trump should be dead. With God, all things are possible. Our job is to do everything we can do to fight and to pray. Speaking of fighting and praying, I have as my guest right now in hour one, our friend John Zmirak. John, welcome back.
Eric, always a pleasure to talk to you. And these better be pretty special people because Houston in August, oh my gosh.
Well, but the hotel, I'm told, is air conditioned.
Oh, wow. You got one of those air-conditioned places in town.
Yes,
Good.
yes,
But I hear they're opening up
yes.
more of them. Yeah.
Very, very important. Very important. Um, I should say also in hour two, before I talk to the man I hope who will be the next governor of California, Steve Hilton, uh, Chris Himes, our producer, interviewed Dallas Jenkins. So that'll be coming up in hour two before Steve Hilton. But John, there's a lot to talk about. I guess the question is where to start. I'll leave
Well,
that
I
to
want
you.
to ask you, have you had a chance to speak to Sean Foyt recently?
I have texted with Sean Foyt recently. I have not spoken with him. He, as you know, and many people know, was recently in Canada where he experienced the fascist police state that currently exists in Canada. Canada, like the UK, like Germany, they don't believe in free speech. They don't believe in freedom of religion. It's really a horror to think that these places have slid that far.
What they do is they're taking post-Christianity, which is parasitical on Christianity, and it's finally killing the host. There are some parasites that just kind of exist along with the host and kind of suck away its strength, but there are some they call parasitoids that by their very nature kill the host. And post-Christianity is a parasitoid in that it sucks all its strength and energy from Christian sentiments, from leftover Christian assumptions and Christian attitudes that would be completely alien outside the Christian world, but it destroys Christianity itself. In Canada, the culture of niceness has turned into a totalitarian death cult, a suicide cult, where the idea that we should respect people and be tolerant of them because they're images of God, even if we differ with their lifestyles, their choices, or their religious beliefs, that is a sort of third order implication of the Christian view of man as Imago Dei. We didn't always do this very well. In the Middle Ages, we were very unpleasant to Jews living in our midst. We would burn people who were heretics. We gradually learned that the implications of the Christian worldview are that you're tolerant and decent, even to people in your midst who hold alien views, maybe views that you regard as evil. Well, that has morphed in Canada into Orthodox biblical Christianity is no longer politically acceptable. It is hate speech. There is at least one pastor in Canada who has been prosecuted under Canada's draconian hate crime laws for what he did was he read aloud in public from the book of Leviticus. He just read the Bible, the parts that offend the LGBTQ, my name is Legion movement. He just read aloud from the Bible. He was prosecuted for hate crimes. Sean Foyt is not a political figure. He is a worship leader. He plays music that I would never listen to at services I would never attend, but they're powerful, moving, sincere Christian worship events. He heroically wouldn't shut down when they were closing all our churches during the COVID panic. That's the most political thing I can say about him is that he defied the COVID panic lockdown. He's doing a tour of Canada with worship events. He's being labeled a MAGA influencer, a Trump extremist, a voice of hate. He's never said anything hateful. He simply preaches the gospel. And who hates the gospel? Principalities and powers. Some of them wearing clerical collars and rainbow vestments and with rainbow flags. You're not hearing a lot of pastors in Canada speak up. Here's this Christian pastor who's being denied permits to worship. Imagine you need a permit to worship at a church or on a farm because they say that his message is intolerant. But all they mean is he's preaching biblical Christianity, which is incompatible with homosexuality and transgenderism. And they're making his speech illegal. And you don't see the Catholic bishops speaking up. You don't see the Anglican bishops. I don't see a lot of evangelical leaders in Canada speaking up. But this is the canary in the coal mine. If this guy can't go and do some worship music on a farm because the Canadian government considers that hate speech. Meanwhile, you've got radical Muslims calling for the elimination of the state of Israel, calling for genocide against Jews, and they're not bothered. That speech is fine because the only speech that's really hate speech is the gospel, and that's what they're targeting.
Well, that says it all. I have to get Sean Foyt on the program, but as I've been following what's going on there, it's exactly what you say. It is what happens to, I mean, we can watch this, and you were just describing this, how you see Christian values work their way through the culture so that eventually we become tolerant in a good way. It's a Christian value up to a point. And that's exactly what you're saying, that, when Luther wanted to be free, to not be Roman Catholic, he wanted religious liberty for himself, but he didn't understand the principle means, okay, then if somebody else breaks off from you, you need to allow them to have religious liberty. What are the limits of that? How does that work? Well, so we see liberty of various kinds work its way through culture. You get the United States of America, and in the United States of America, over time, we see liberty expanded. And then finally, you get to this fatal point where it goes too far, basically. And of course, in places like Canada, it's the classic example where they begin. Well, I don't know what is it really? At what point does it go wrong? Can you help us figure that out? I've tried to think about this.
There's a very clear conceptual line. What should be binding, what should be enforced by the state, are the dictates of natural law, which is knowable by reason alone, which is written on the human heart, so that, as St. Paul says, we may be without excuse. You want the natural law to be enforced by the state. You don't want supernatural revelation to be enforced by the state. So, thou shalt not kill is something the prohibition on murder and theft is something that a rational human being could come to without having to accept Jesus Christ, without having to have the miraculous grace of the gift of faith imparted by the Holy Spirit. You don't need that to know that murder is wrong. But we don't want the state enforcing faith in the Trinity or forcing people to believe or not believe in the apparitions of the Virgin Mary at Fatima in Portugal. So the line is pretty clear. Natural law. We should want the natural law. Natural law would forbid same-sex marriage. Natural law could forbid idolatry. So if it were prudent, you might want to not let pagan idolatrous cults in your country. In America, our First Amendment wouldn't permit that. But in theory, anything that the natural law, and there's a long tradition of natural law thought going back to Aristotle. Yes.
Forgive me for cutting off, John. Just realized we're going to a break. We'll be right back. Plenty more with John Zmirak. We're talking to John Zmirak. In hour two, I'm talking to Steve Hilton, who is running for governor of California. Praise God. That's next year, of course. But talking to him in hour two. And before that, Chris Himes, my producer, is talking to Dallas Jenkins, the re-release of a Dallas Jenkins film coming up. But right now, for this hour, I get to talk to John Zmirak. So, John, we're talking about a lot of important stuff. Keep going.
I was saying that we as believers should want the natural law to be the basis of civil law. Natural law is the law that binds every human being that God wrote on the human heart that is knowable by reason alone. Uh, if you want to learn about natural law, you find it in Aristotle, Cicero, Aquinas, and then there was a strong Protestant tradition of natural law thought. The Calvinists embraced natural law, which seemed surprising, but they did. And in fact, the laws of war, the idea that you don't kill civilians, you don't burn villages in wartime, was something that developed after 1648, after the horrors of the 30 Years' War. And it was sort of an ecumenical movement. Both Catholics and Protestants came to this idea that civilians should be spared in wartime. That never happened before. That didn't happen during the Crusades, didn't happen during the Hundred Years' War. Anyway, the idea that there are principles of right and wrong that every rational person should be able to agree on, and then we argue for on the merits. That's the natural law tradition. It's something the Nazis tried to persecute. There was a great thinker, Heinrich Roman. I have a chapter about him in my book, The Race to Save Our Century. He was a natural law thinker in Nazi Germany. And he wrote that the laws of the state cannot contradict the laws of nature. And he said that the Nuremberg race laws, forbidding racial intermarriage, targeting Jews, he said these violated the natural law. So he had to flee Germany. He ended up at Notre Dame University in the United States. And he's a great thinker. He's the kind of person we should be looking to. But when our Constitution is perverted, as it was with Obergefell, to say that there can be same-sex marriage, that in fact, human dignity implies the ability to marry whoever you want, whether they're of the same sex or the opposite sex, and that it is an attack on the human dignity of gay citizens not to let them have legally enforceable marriages. John Roberts, of all people, in his dissent, said this will lead to the persecution of Christians. And he was right. You see florists and wedding cake makers and wedding planners all getting civilly harassed by hugely powerful law firms funded by the gay lobby, being persecuted because they don't want to take part in the charade of same-sex marriage. You see women's sports being destroyed because we're obliged to take part in the charade of transgenderism. The state can be neutral about which revealed religion is true. The state can be neutral between Catholics and Protestants. It can't be neutral on the natural law. It's either with it or against it. And right now, our government is mostly against it. The governments of Canada and Great Britain and much of Western Europe are ferociously opposed to the natural law. Under Biden, they were putting peaceful pro-life demonstrators in prison for years for peacefully protesting illegal late-term abortions in Washington, D.C. I'm sad to say my own Catholic bishops did very little about that. But now they are raising a complete hysterical storm about enforcing our immigration laws, which are just, nonpartisan, non-racist, completely just laws that have been neglected for decades. My own bishops are sponsoring protests against any kind of enforcement of our immigration law for one reason. They make money from immigration. The U.S. Catholic bishops made $3 billion in 15 years from the federal government resettling immigrants. I like to say if the Catholic bishops cashed a check every time a woman kept her baby instead of aborting it, they would be pro-life fanatics. But since they don't get checks for that, but they do get checks when people swim the Rio Grande, they have become an immigration Ponzi scheme. And a lot of Protestant churches are in on this too. In fact, the Southern Baptist Convention's lobbying group, the ERLC, they work with organizations founded by George Soros to promote open borders.
It's unbelievable. At the heart of all of this. Well, actually, let me ask you: are you referring to an article that you have written at the stream right now?
Yeah. There's a stream up, an article up the stream now called "Hey, let's build another Tower of Babel, but hear me out. Let's do it on sand."
Hey, you've got these catchy titles. Hey, let's build another Tower of Babel.
But hear me out. Let's do it on sand.
Let's do it on sand.
Yes.
Wise words, wise advice,
Very
John.
wise. Yeah.
Okay, so people want to read the article. It's at stream.org. Tell us, what is your thesis there? I know it touches on some of the things we've already been speaking
Yeah. Well,
about.
I talk about two kinds of principles that you need to found a stable society with ordered liberty. The kind of society where people treat each other differently, decently, where they respect property rights, where they respect religious freedom and ethnic diversity. First, you need the Christian worldview that man is made in the image and likeness of God. Without that, you're going to always lurch into some kind of cruel, tyrannical, uh, vicious political system that doesn't respect the human person. Like the Roman Empire had a lot of virtues, but it did practice slavery. A third of the population were slaves. It did put the slaves to fight each other in gladiatorial combat, and the aristocrats all laughed while the slaves killed each other in a form of human sacrifice for their entertainment. Uh, the Muslim world doesn't have this view of man as the image of God, which is why it allows polygamy and sex slavery. To this day, practitioners of jihad are told by their Orthodox Muslim religious authorities that if they conquer non-Muslim women in battle, they can take them as their sex slaves. That is Islamic law right up to this day, and it's happening in Africa right now. There's horrendous jihad attacks in Congo and in Nigeria by Muslim militias, uncontrolled by their governments, murdering hundreds of mostly Catholics and Anglicans, and the world is not saying a word. Meanwhile, it's fixated on Gaza. And Gaza is a tragic situation, but it's also kind of a political fetish of the left. Nobody's talking about the persecution of the Druze in Syria. Hundreds of Druze have been murdered by the Al-Qaeda government of Syria, which was brought to power with the help of American neocons. People like Lindsey Graham and John McCain and Mark Levin and all the neocon interventionists wanted this previous secular government of Syria overthrown. Some of us, like Tulsi Gabbard and I, were warning it's going to be replaced by something worse. These people are Al-Qaeda. John McCain said they were moderate rebels. He vouched them personally. Well, those moderate rebels took power in Syria and then are persecuting the Alawite minority, the Druze, and the Christians, which is what Al-Qaeda is going to do. Jihadis are going to jihad, and there's no way to stop them except to have a secular dictator repressing them. So you need the Christian worldview, but you need something else. And this is something that people like David French and the Catholic bishops and way too many well-meaning, high-minded Christians that they neglect. You need the basic lessons of history, lessons of prudence, of sanity, of governance that Christian rulers displayed in previous centuries. For instance, you don't have open borders. You don't let anyone waltz into your country, claim citizenship, get voting rights, and start seizing your property, start imposing their religion on you. That basic common sense dictate is something that has been thrown out the window by people who say, oh, but the gospel says we must welcome all, welcome the stranger. And they don't look at the actual context in the Old Testament where strangers who came to Israel had to stop committing idolatry. They had to learn the language. They had to assimilate. They had to obey the Jewish law. They don't look at any of that. No, we just got to bring in infinity foreigners and let them take over Minnesota and turn it into a colony of Somalia. We have to let people from Uganda come to New York and try to impose communist policies like Mamdani is trying to do. To me, I used to say, immigration decides whether America will survive. Abortion decides whether America deserves to survive. And those two things are true, but they're also intertwined. If we don't get control of immigration, abortion will be legal everywhere forever. And every left-wing policy will be imposed by the hordes of docile foreigners that our enemies are trying to import, who they want to be voters, who will vote themselves tax benefits and keep the left in power forever. That's how the left took over Britain. It's how it took over France. It's how it took over Germany. And now we see people in Britain going to prison for Facebook posts where they say, oh, I think there might be too much immigration, chap. They go to prison. You know who doesn't go to prison? The Pakistani rape gangs.
Wow. Okay. We'll be right back talking to John Zmirak. Welcome back talking to John Zmirak. John, have you seen any interesting films lately, John?
Yes, I have a movie I can actually, with some reservations, recommend. It's
Can I
called,
can I guess the title?
yeah,
Eddington?
you are a mind reader, Eric.
How did I do
That
that?
is
That is
necromancy.
unbelievable.
That is necromancy. It
Eddington.
violates the first commandment. You must repent.
Okay, so the film is Eddington. I've only heard of it. What
Okay.
is it about?
It is the first, and I predict the last movie that will depict the insanity of the COVID panic. Just how awful life got in 2020 when they decided to lock us in our homes, close our churches, destroy thousands of businesses, declare churches inessential, but abortion clinics were essential. They stayed open. Casinos stayed open. Liquor stores stayed open. But small businesses were devastated. We were forced to take an untested experimental gene therapy that was derived from aborted babies. Our pastors, my own Pope, told us we had to do it, or if we didn't love our neighbor, if you don't take the vaccine, you don't love your neighbor. It
You
was,
know, if I had my eyes closed, I would swear that Pope Francis had been resurrected and was speaking just now. That was really spooky. Please don't do that again. But wait a minute. There's who made the film? What is this?
um, I forget the director's name. He's not known as a conservative. He's it's a satire, okay? It shows you life in a small New Mexico town where the mayor is in bed with big pharma and big tech, and he's imposing the draconian lockdown and mask mandates on a small town in New Mexico where COVID has not even appeared yet. And the sheriff of the town is against the lockdowns. He's against the mask mandates. He thinks they're absurd. So it's a political conflict between the forces of the COVID panic and sort of populist right-wing resistance to this unprecedented authoritarian attack on our liberty.
So you're obviously telling us we should see this movie.
Yes, now it kind of jumps the shark at one point. Weird things happen. It's not an unambiguously conservative film, but it's a brilliant satire. And it makes fun of all sides. It makes fun of the COVID lockdown panic fanatics. And it makes fun of some of the crazy QAnon conspiracy theorists who are on our side for maybe the wrong reasons. So it kind of cuts all ways.
Is there? But how did this film get made? I mean, it's. Is there anybody in it that we would know?
Pedro Pascal and Joaquin Phoenix and Emily Blunt. Not Emily Blunt. Emma Thompson. Who's the? I'm sorry. Just a second.
Yeah, we're gonna we're gonna have to look that up.
Joaquin Phoenix plays the rebel sheriff. Pedro Pascal plays the cloying, smarmy COVID lockdown guy, and Emma Stone plays the sheriff's wife. So it's got wonderful acting.
Joaquin Phoenix,
Yeah,
and Emma Stone. So this is a pretty mainstream film, obviously. Wow, how interesting.
Well,
That's interesting.
it reminds you, it was really chilling. It brought us back to a period of our lives we'd like to forget. When you had to put a stupid mask on to get in an Uber, when you had to stand 6 feet apart from each other. I mean, if three people gathered together in their backyard, their neighbors would be calling the police on them. The COVID panic was a real-time experiment in global authoritarianism. They had camps in Australia where thousands of people were put and held against their will in turn because they didn't want to be vaccinated. And the CDC was planning to build internment camps for the unvaccinated right here in America. It was on their website. They just never got around to doing it.
I have to say, honestly, I will not see this film because just being reminded of it, even as you're talking, it was such a painful period. It really was so awful. It was so amazing to me that we suddenly in America descended into it because I never dreamt that that could happen in America. I mean, absolutely never dreamt.
The only fond memory I have of it was if somebody got in my face about social distancing or my mask wasn't on right, I would just pretend to sneeze on them and watch them run as if I had thrown a hand grenade. That was the
I mean,
only.
I have stories. I remember Suzanne was in Central Park, and some friends of ours were walking in Central Park and saw her. And when she said she had been vaccinated, they backed away.
But
These are friends.
normally that's what I want liberals to do. So I kind of wish that were still in
Yeah,
effect.
but they're not, they weren't liberals. This is what amazes me. Or maybe they're not exactly where we are. But the point is, people went insane. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is. I've
Well,
got many stories like that.
so
It's
here's what
painful
happened.
to think about.
The left figured out that there's a loophole in the Constitution. And there really is. The Supreme Court in the past has said that constitutional rights can be suspended in times of epidemic. And so what the left does is they use public health. Public health is their new slogan for whatever they want to do. When they had George Floyd riots, and by the way, they make fun of Black Lives Matter and Antifa in the movie Eddington 2. That's worth seeing. That alone makes
That's amazing, John. I'm honestly amazed
you should
at
see it.
Hollywood, and if Jake Wynn Phoenix and Emma Stone are in it, that's Hollywood. This is not some independent conservative film.
Not on
The
pure
fact,
force.
the fact that they would, what's that? No, but I'm saying the fact that they would be honest about this,
Yeah.
that's dramatic. Folks, we're going to go to another break. Want to remind you, our friends at Food for the Poor asking for your help. Texas, Central Texas, because of the flood, they need your help. Please go to metaxastalk.com. You'll see the banner, metaxastalk.com. We need everybody to do what you can. It's an emergency, metaxastalk.com. Welcome back. Final segment with John Zmirak. John, don't go away, John. Don't go away, because I want to talk to you about some positive stuff. Would that be okay with you?
Reluctantly, I will. I'm willing
Okay.
to
Well,
talk.
for example, Tulsi Gabbard, a great hero. She used to be a Democrat. She, as most of the listeners to this program know, as the director of national intelligence, has done some things that really have brought us the, I don't see any way around it. It is the biggest, by far, political crisis in American history. And there are a lot of people, because the mainstream media is not covering this, they're unaware of what is happening. And I do not think there is any way this juggernaut cannot be stopped. I think Donald Trump has probably advised his people, this is real, this is serious, and I expect you to get convictions, or I just expect you to take this seriously. And it's not just like, well, some people did some bad things
No,
and
no.
we're going to let it go.
This was a deep state coup d'etat against the American people. The George W. Bush administration gave the deep state vast powers it never should have had in the form of the Patriot Act. And I was one of the few cranks at the time denouncing the Patriot Act, and everybody said I was crazy. And I said, don't give George W. Bush any power that you don't want somebody like Hillary Clinton to have in 4 years. Sure enough, Obama took power and used the Patriot Act to turn the FBI and the CIA into a kind of political secret police to target his political enemies. So our friendly FBI became a lot more like the East German Stasi. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If the FBI came to my door, I would try to call a Mexican drug cartel to protect me, because the deep state is the greatest threat to America that exists on the face of this earth. China, North Korea, Iran, Russia, the whole rest of the world has nothing on the FBI and the CIA as enemies of American freedom. And Tulsi Gabbard is trying to expose the most obvious, the most outrageous, the worst thing they did, which was to collude with the Hillary Clinton campaign to make up a dossier they knew was fake that portrayed their political opponent, Donald Trump, as a Russian spy, a Russian asset colluding with the Russian government to hack our election. Even after the election was over, the Obama White House colluded with the Clinton campaign, brought in the FBI and the CIA to certify fake intelligence, as fake as what led us into the Iraq War, fake intelligence to try to undermine Trump in office. Hopefully, I think they were trying to force him to resign so that Mike Pence, that happy, cozy, mindless puppet who pretends to be a conservative Christian, who I think is simply a deep state asset, they wanted Mike Pence. All right, Mike Pence will come in and it'll be as if this election had never happened. In other words, the American people voted wrong, and the deep state was going to correct their mistake. It was going to protect the voters from themselves. Like when I was 2 years old, I picked up my uncle's service revolver. He was a cop, and I was walking around a party with a loaded gun in my hand. And they talked to me until like, Johnny, put down the pistol, put down the pistol. That's how the deep state sees the American voters. 2-year-olds who got their uncle's gun.
Excuse me, John. Excuse me. Did you actually do that?
Yeah,
And you think I'm just going to let that go? You
of course I did that. There was a gun. There was a gun. There was a Zmirak. I was going to go for it.
I mean, no, this is, I don't know that I've heard you tell this story. You were how old?
2.
And you picked up a gun.
Yeah, I was there.
So they just left guns around,
Well,
not
he
realizing.
was a cop, and he didn't think he didn't know what he was dealing with. Of course, I was going to find the loaded gun.
Holy cow. Holy
But that's
cow.
the American people. We are 2-year-olds in the deep state are the adults trying to get us to put down the gun. And Donald
Okay,
Trump.
so do you have a sense that anything will come of this? Because there's a lot of cynicism out there, even
Yeah.
among MAGA Republicans.
I if nothing comes of it, then the country's over. So I think God is not finished with America. So I'm hoping to see John Brennan and Jim Clapper and James Comey in orange jumpsuits. I'm hoping to see Barack Obama disgraced to the depth that Nixon was disgraced, because what Obama did was infinitely worse than anything Richard Nixon dreamt of in his darkest nightmares. What Obama did was to try to steal an election. And then his appointees, after they did steal the 2020 election, persecuted Trump supporters, persecuted pro-lifers, labeled PTA moms as domestic extremists for trying to keep groomer porn out of their kids' classrooms. You nice Christian people out there have no idea how much your elites hate you. They hate you, and they want to replace you with immigrants from Somalia. There's no way around it. Their model for America is Minnesota, where a bunch of inbred Somalis who marry their cousins and practice radical Islam take over the government and enact the agenda of the radical left.
Not that we're judging.
No, I don't.
Because, hey, in these topsy-turvy times, who's to say what's right or
It says in
wrong?
the Bible, judge not.
Yep. Well, okay, so John, though, I mean, what you just said is what I've said, that it seems clear to me that God, by saving Donald Trump's life, by allowing him to return to the presidency, has made it plain that God has a plan for America, and that it is his will to save this nation. And part of saving the nation means draining the swamp.
Yes.
I wrote a children's book about that, Donald Drains the Swamp. And I really do believe that we're beginning to see that now, that what Tulsi Gabbard just did and what is happening is the beginning of that process.
I'm looking forward to your next book, Donald Deports Your Nanny.
Thank you. Actually, the second book in the series is called Donald Builds the Wall. And that is about immigration, of course. Those are children's books that I have written, folks. They are available at mystore.com. If you use the code ERIC, they are very inexpensive, mystore.com. But you have to use the code ERIC. John, I'm afraid we're out of time. We've got about 10 seconds left. So I want to remind my audience we're doing a fundraiser for the people in Texas, folks, for the people whose lives have been devastated by the floods. We have an emergency request. I'll say more about that when we come back. In hour 2, I'm talking to Steve Hilton, running for governor of California. And before that, we're talking to Dallas Jenkins. So stay tuned.